Hello, my name is Dave Whiteley. I'm Technical Director of Envisage UK Limited, and I'd like to take this opportunity to show you the new features in Autodesk Inventor 2014. First of all, we'll just take a simple look at, or a quick look at the boundary patch enhancements in Inventor. When I'm working on tooling and I'm working with surfaces, I do find it awkward to be able to select edges to create boundary patches. In 2014, when we create a boundary patch, we have an automatic edge chain available to us. This doesn't necessarily, or the edges do not necessarily have to be tangent, and we have the ability to select an edge as opposed to the separate edges that we used to have to select before. This now changes the edges for us, and also on top of that, if we do actually use G1 or G2 continuity, we can give these weights when we're creating the surface patch. Okay, let's move across to the filleting. When I'm working with customers who design forgings and castings, one of their major issues is the ability to create fillets easily and quickly. And what we have new in 2014 when we create fillets are the ability to actually, let's just select some edges that we're going to fillet. You get the usual previews. Now I'm going to change my radius to 9mm here, and the preview is now changing, and you'll notice that the preview in red or magenta here is actually showing a failed fillet, whereas the edges at the back are greeny blue color, which is showing the preview of the fillet that can actually be created. We get the error here that we can expand to explain that certain edges cannot be filleted at this radius. However, if I now continue, what we then have is the ability to accept the successful blends. So it's saying here that 11 of the 16 selected edges cannot be blended at the current size. I'm going to go ahead and accept these, and it will then go ahead and fillet the edges that can be filleted at that point. It's a superb addition to the filleting tool, especially for tool makers who are filleting all the time. Okay, let's move across to sweeps. Now with the sweep tool, as you can appreciate, up until now, if the sweep self-intersects, then it cannot be created. This is just a very quick example of the sweep tool in action. So for instance, if we take this profile here and select the path and click on OK, you can see, look, it self-intersects in the corners here, but it's quite happy to create the sweep. And likewise, if we take the profile here and do a cut, again we've got self-intersecting corners. It's quite happy to create the sweep. If we take another look at a more complex example where we got a sweep on a drive rail, so if we go ahead and run the sweep here, set the path, but in this case drive rail as well, we get the preview, click on OK, and as you can see, we've got a self-intersecting solid. This just was not possible in previous releases of the modeler, and we can now do this in the sweep command. One thing that's been added in part design, as you can appreciate, if we go to the design views in parts, we've got the ability to show color overrides. We've got the ability to show or display work features, whether we want to show them or not in this case. They've also added the ability in 2014 to change the camera view for this particular design view. So do you want it auto saved as before, or do you want to restore a saved camera, or do you want to save the current view as the new camera for that view? So now if I go back to that particular design view, you'll notice it's saved that camera view. Okay, let's move across to assemblies, in particular the constraint tool. We have a new function in constrain called symmetry, and in the symmetry tool we have 3 selections. We select the first set of geometry second set of geometry, in this case the faces on these legs here, the pads, then the symmetry plane. That then adds symmetry to the assembly, and as you can see, if I move the component on one side, the other one moves with it because of the symmetry constraint. Likewise, if we take these actuators here, again this time I'm going to select a center of the cylinders here, not planes in this case. We can select points as well. We select, whoops, it does help if I choose symmetry and the symmetry plane, and again we've got the symmetry in action from the constraint tool. Okay, new in 2014, we have the ability to create slots in sketches. So if we just take this part here and activate it, sketch on the face, and you'll notice here in the sketch tools, in the drawer area of the ribbon, we've got slots where we can create center to center slots, center point slots, curved slots on 3 points, and so on and so forth. I'll just create the center to center slot here, place it on my sketch. Here we can put in the length of the slot, the radius of the slot, and then all I've got to do now is dimension this up against my component, and we've got a slot created very easily. I'll just extrude this through, or select the sketch, left click on it, use extrude all the way through, and there's our slot created very easily, one hit from the new slot tool in the sketch ribbon. Okay, new in 2014, as if we haven't got enough constrain or assembly tools, we now have the ability to add joints as well. I'm going to go through those in a second, but first of all I'm going to place another component into my assembly. And before I actually left click and place it, you'll notice I've actually got an XYZ triad on this part, and if I right click, you'll notice that I've got a number of options available to me before I place it. So for instance, I can rotate 90 degrees around any of the axes. I can also place grounded at the origin. Now you need to be aware that new in 2014, when you place the first component into a blank assembly, it is not grounded by default. It gives you the ability to move it afterwards. If you wish, you can right click and place grounded at the origin. The other option you've got is in the application options, you can turn the legacy option on, which will place the first component at the origin. But be aware, in 2014, first components placed in a blank assembly are not grounded. So let's rotate this around the x-axis. We'll rotate this around the y-axis, and I just want to do that a few more times to get it in the right orientation. And now I can just left click and place this part in the orientation that I want it on my assembly before I start adding constraints. Let's get these parts out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to connect this component to the slot, and what I actually want to do, of course, is use this slot length to allow this part to move up and down the slot. Now we can't really do this in constraints, but if I go to the joint command and select the circular edge on the back of this component here, the circular edge on the slot, that will automatically decide on a joint. In this case it's decided on rotational and shown a mini video movement, if you like, of the joint that it's decided upon. I can now change this to something like a slider, and as you can see, the orientation is not quite correct at the moment, so I can now align it so it's in the correct orientation. But before I go any further, if you go to the dialog box, I can go to limits and actually put limits in for the start and end. So if I put in here -15, because 15, as you can see, will show the preview in the wrong direction, so I'm just going to change that to -15. I've now got a small partial dimension here showing you the limits of the linear movement of this slider joint. If I click on OK and leave you in suspense for a few seconds, we'll just go to joint again, select the head of the fastener here and the hole. Okay, it wants to do a rotational constraint. I'm just going to flick it so it's in the opposite direction. I'm going to change this to a rigid constraint, which is like adding 3 make constraints in certain instances. That's going to do a rigid constraint. Click on OK. That assembles it together, and as you can see, we can slide the joint, and I haven't got a 0 on this. We'll sort that out now. Because it's sliding off the slot. So to do that, if I use the free move command and move the component out of the way, you'll see that what it's actually showing, it's showing in rubber band, or rubber bands here if you like, the relationships between all the parts. But also you'll see this glyph here showing the slider constraint, which I can now right click and edit, and then we can adjust the limits and put an end constraint on as well. Click on OK, that reassembles, and now we've got the constraint working correctly. If I just continue on a little bit further, I won't assemble all of this, but if I take this ball joint here, again go to the joint command, select the sphere, you'll notice that there are 3 options. You need to be careful you select the mid point and not the top or bottom points here, and likewise with the ball joint there, that will put the 2 together. Show a little video of how it's actually going to move this joint. OK on that. Now let's just add this to the other end of this threaded bar here. Add a joint again, select one edge, the other circular edge, flip the direction, put in there an offset should you wish, just like you would in the constraint tool. And if we want to, let me just align this as well. Okay, we can now change this to rigid, which will stop it rotating, and it assembles it together. Now if I take these 2 components here and copy them and paste over to the other side and add a joint again, you'll notice that the joints have actually come with it and everything assembles together as expected. Let me just change that to rigid again. Okay, and there you have it. There's the new joint tools. Remember that if we use free move, we can actually drag components away, and from there we see the joints and the relationships between the parts. If we click on update, obviously they all go back together again as expected. Okay, let's have a look at large assembly performance in Inventor 2014. We now have the ability to, if I just open up a large assembly, which as you can imagine is going to take a while. This has got it's got 1151 unique components in it, and obviously it's going to take a few minutes to open up because every single part and assembly has been opened up in the background. And if we look at the bottom right hand corner here, we'll see the counter that we know and love, which is showing us that we've actually got 17,359 entities in this assembly, and it still hasn't finished loading. And we can then, obviously once it has loaded, we can then start working on the assembly. Okay, it's just finally loaded. It's just a little bit slow at the moment. Now if I close this and open up a version that's been saved in 2014 but using an express mode, we'll see how quickly this opens up. So we got 1151 files as per normal, but the in express mode, it opens it up a lot faster, and I can now work on it immediately. It's superb for working with large assemblies. As you can see, I can change this to load full and it'll load everything in full mode. There are some disadvantages and there are some advantages. The advantages are, of course, that the assemblies load up a lot faster. However, if I want to work on something, I cannot edit in place. I have to select the component and open it up separately. So there are certain disadvantages. I can, however, if I do want to start working on this, I could then click on load full and it would load everything as expected. The assembly files are larger because of course they have to contain the solid model data for all these components within the assembly file, as opposed to reading in the parts and assemblies that it uses. However, it's a small price to pay for extremely fast large assembly performance. And finally, new in 2014, I want to have a look at another simplified tool. We've already got shrink wrap, and customers are wanting to work even smarter. These sorts of tools. BIM is coming, is vital to designs between mechanical and architectural CAD packages, and we want to simplify models to send to architectural designers. This is the tool that we can use to get there. So for instance, I've got quite a complicated valve arrangement here, and I'm just going to go to the new Simplify tab in the ribbon, and first of all we decide what components we actually want to bring through to our simplified part. So we click on Include Components. As you can see, this is a frame generator part, so we've also got a solid that was used to create the frame generator assembly. So if I just select everything but deselect that solid, I can then include the components that I require to take forward to my simplified part. However, what I want to do now is I want to simplify this valve arrangement even more, and I'm going to define envelopes. Now, envelopes in the past have been quite crude in the fact that it just took the bounding box for the solids. Now if I go to define envelopes, if I select this, I can then decide what shape I want. I want a bounding cylinder. But if I just go to the front view here, I can now either drag the arrow to suit the size I require, or there is an option here, I'll just move this out of the way, to actually align with an edge, and this will align to the circular edge on the edge I've selected on this part, and likewise with the height I can align as well. I'm just going to do this by eye for speed more than anything else, but we can also do that. And in this instance I actually want to keep the original model because I want to use it again. So that creates a basic cylinder to represent part of my valve assembly, but of course I've got a set of flanges across here as well, which is part of it. So again, if I go to define envelopes and select this part, I can now reorientate the cylinder to these flanges, and again I can resize, and I can use a line if I wish. Again, I'll just do this by eye just for speed. And then in this case I don't want to see the original anymore, so I can hide the original, create the solid. The original's been the visibility of the original one's been turned off, and then when I create my simplified part, it'll actually create my simplified part of what we see on the assembly and these features here. We'll do one last simplification on this box. I don't know what electronics I've got in this, we're not interested, we just want a rectangular box to show where this is. So again, we go to define envelopes, select a part, let me just select just that simple front edge there. We're going to put a bounding box around this. Again, just create the shape. Again, I can align if I wish, and I don't want to see the original, and I'll just do this one last time to get rid of everything else. Hide the original, and now we've got our simplification created, and then I can push this out to my simplified part and get a single part file of this simplified assembly. So what I've shown you is or are the new features, or some of the new features in 2014, and I will push this up to YouTube in the near future. If my contact details on this slide, as you can see on there, our YouTube channel is Envisage UK Ltd, and if you need to contact me on anything that you've seen so far, then please use the email that you see on this slide. Thank you very much for attending.